Many of us spend our whole life in search of purpose, desperately seeking meaningful ways to make a difference in the world with the short amount of time we are given. The Deploying High podcast has been designed to help you analyze what gives you purpose.
Hello there, this is Chief Gene Saunders with Project Lifesaver International, the founder and CEO. You're listening and watching Deploying High. I have a really special guest with me here today. Been in law enforcement for a long time. Helps run the Project Lifesaver program in Port St. Lucie, Florida at the police department. I got to know this gentleman under some unusual circumstances, which we'll go into at some other time. But he's a great guy and one of the people that I definitely wanted to have on the program here, because I think he lends a lot of expertise, not only to the law enforcement side, but the Project Lifesaver side, because like all of us, we kind of learn as we go along. The blueprints are being made as we do them. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Sergeant Charlie Lumpkin with the Port St. Lucie Police Department. And Charlie, so glad to have you here. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you inviting me, and that introduction was quite the... I really felt good about myself when he started saying all that. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, you should feel good about yourself, So, just to start off the questions, Charlie, how long you been in law enforcement?
I tell you, sometimes you don't realize how fast it goes by. I think I am coming up now on 24 years. 24 years, 7 years with Fort Pierce PD, which is an agency just to the north of us. And here I am in Port St. Lucie, and I've been here going almost on 18 years now.
It does pass fast. I mean, and you and I have talked in the past. I can remember when I was a young patrol officer just coming in, and I hear all these guys talking about retirement, and I'm saying, retirement, that's so far away, I'm not worried. And then all of a sudden, gee, money, I'm getting ready to retire.
Yep, I understand that. What you just said, exact same thing when you're young, and you don't even see that light at the end of the tunnel, and next thing you know, 5 years goes by, 10 years goes by, 15, 20 years goes by, and then all of a sudden here we are. And I'm right on the edge of going into a program they call the DROP program next year. So, yeah, who would have thought? 25 years, here we are, and about to enter into another phase of life. So, but it's been a fun ride, very interesting ride.
Well, anything in law enforcement can get very interesting, but it's kind of scary how quick it goes by. And you think about it, I know, what do you plan on doing, once you pull the pin?
Good question. There's a lot of things going on right now. And what I mean by that is I'm entering into the DROP next year. Once, for people who don't know, once you enter this DROP, it's an acronym for Deferred Retirement Option Plan. And what that does is you're retired from a city or county pension, but you're still employed by that agency. You're just not contributing to a pension any longer. So you're receiving those benefits, and that money gets dropped into there. But thus the term drop. They like it like that. So I don't know, really. I can tell you that law enforcement has come a long way as far as just a lot of different aspects of it. I'm one of those people when I give it my all, I do everything I can, but I also know when it's time to walk away and realize, hey, maybe it's time to do a new chapter, whatever that may be. Who knows? I'm probably not going to follow that same. A lot of people get into private investigations when they retire or whatever. I should probably have an answer for you to know what I'm going to do. I know once I'm done in the next 6 years total, I'll be done with law enforcement, meaning I'm not going to go work for another agency. I may just hang up the whole investigative part of it and decide to go into something else. But I know I'll be doing something. I don't know exactly what that's going to be, even though I told my wife I wouldn't work anymore after that. But you have to have purpose every day.
I absolutely agree with that. I can remember when the time was coming, and okay, I've got about 3 or 4 years left. I think now's the time I need to start looking at, okay, well, what am I going to do when I leave here? And so, I looked at one of those natural progressions. The position I was in would kind of lend it to maybe go into a small department as a chief or something such as this. Well, I interviewed for a bunch of chief's jobs, and after I got through, I found out that I was in the Avis category, always number 2 in the selection process. So I think that kind of told me, and I actually wanted to, like you, I didn't want to really stay in law enforcement. I wanted to stay close to it, but I didn't want to be in it so much anymore. I know, as you know, I spent a lot of time with SWAT and special operations and had a lot of job offerings with some of the companies that you do those kind of tactical things. And that really didn't appeal to me either. So I know exactly, where you're coming from. So, but what made you get into law enforcement?
That's a good question. I was a little rowdy when I was growing up. And what I mean is I was born and raised, I'm an oddity. I actually was born and raised in Fort Pierce, born right on 7th Street. It's not a hospital anymore. At that time it was, and that's where myself and I have a twin brother. So we were born way back then and was raised right there in Fort Pierce. And I think growing up, we were in a very culturally diverse neighborhood growing up. And what I mean by that is it wasn't just a white neighborhood. It was Hispanic, it was black, it was white, and everything in between. We grew up with a lot of cultures. So growing up there, I don't think we had any direction. I don't even think I knew what I was going to do. I was very spontaneous at the age of 16, 17, which encountered my first real employer, which was the United States Army, going into the Army at the age of 17. So I just turned 17. My parents signed the paperwork. They were more than happy to get me out of the house and get me out of that neighborhood. And so the Army gave me a job. And that's what was my first taste of getting out of this area and seeing other parts of the United States and eventually the world. But I think I always swore to myself I'd never come back here. And it's funny when you taste other areas and you see other areas, the area you come from, it really isn't as bad as you think it is when you originally left, thinking it was just this non-existent, non-exciting. Sometimes not being exciting is a good thing, with constant action and stuff like that. So joining the military was my ticket out of here. Law enforcement was not on my radar at all. I think as I got a little older, and I spent 7 years total in the Army, I got married. I was married. We had 2 children. So I looked more at what is it I really want to do, and I ended up getting into corrections. I knew that wasn't my permanent stop, but in order to get some experience involving not the law enforcement. Law enforcement is divided in 2 parts in the state of Florida. You have the correction side, and then you have the road patrol or the regular people out on the streets and enforcing laws and stuff like that. So my first step was to get the corrections experience and then do the crossover course and then eventually get my foot into the police side of law enforcement. And that's exactly what I did.
As long as I've known you, it's interesting how much some of our lives parallel, because you followed the path of going into the Army, which is what I did. I went into the Army at 17 and a half. So it's just interesting how you talk to law enforcement officers all around the country, and a lot of their lives all parallel each other. If you kind of look at them, it starts with the military. It lasts a period of time, depending on how much time they want to give the military and, how tired of it they get. But it's interesting how many of them do come into law enforcement. And, one of the things I think draws people with military background into law enforcement is that it does have a military taste to it.
Correct.
The structure and the uniforms and
chain of command.
And the chain of command. Exactly. So now you've been there 24 years. What kind of jobs have you done in the police department?
So when I was in Fort Pierce, I road patrol. That's always your basic bread and butter. When you go out there, out of the FTO, the field training program, automatically you hit the streets. And I was rather young then, full of all kinds of energy, so I could run after the bad guys, no problem, and enjoyed it quite a bit. Did that for 7 years. During that assignment in Fort Pierce, road patrol, I ended up doing an assignment. It was called and everyone's got different acronyms for it. Basically, it was a community policing aspect of law enforcement. So that was my first taste of community, being involved in the community. As a young officer, it probably wasn't my cup of tea. I was more about being on the streets and running around and looking for
chasing the bad guys.
Exactly. There you go. So that was a little boring for me. I went back to the road after a certain period of time, but then I made my way into the drug unit, the vice unit. Spent a couple years there, and then made my way back to criminal investigations, which to me is kind of my forte. I really enjoy that. 7 years with Fort Pierce, decided to go make some money, and I applied for Port St. Lucie. Before I applied for Fort Pierce, Port St. Lucie said, thanks, but no thanks. You have no experience. So I went to Fort Pierce, got the experience, reapplied for Port St. Lucie while Fort Pierce, the union was in some really heated negotiations with the city. And a lot of people said, if we don't settle this contract, meaning in Fort Pierce, that we're going to go elsewhere. I made that threat, but unlike a lot of them, I carry out. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. They got bogged down. I reapplied for Port St. Lucie, and they took me 2 months later and gave me a job. Back on road patrol, probably within 2 years, I was back up in criminal investigations as a persons detective. I spent a number of years there, and then I was promoted to sergeant, went back to the road, and eventually made my way back to criminal investigations as a sergeant on the person side. And then an opportunity presented itself to go to internal affairs, which I thought I would never, ever, ever want to do that. But I did. At that time, Sergeant Del Toro was being promoted to Lieutenant Del Toro, and I was a sergeant in criminal investigations, and he said, hey, what do you think? And I was like, okay, let's give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, then I won't do it. If it does work out, then good. Spent a couple years there. Left internal affairs and went to the drug unit as a sergeant. And the theme here is a couple of years. Everything I do is a couple of years.
Well, that's a kind of a theme across police departments. 2 to 3 years.
So go from internal affairs to the drug unit. Left the drug unit, went back to internal affairs. Went back up to criminal investigations for a short period of time. Went back to the road, and now I'm back in internal affairs again for a third tour. So yeah, that's pretty much my career, and we're starting to get down to that wind down phase. Even though still got 6 more years left, there's a lot to be done and a lot of fun to have in those 6 years.
Well, again, there was while you were talking, here goes another parallel. You started in the police department on road patrol. You went to vice narcotics. You went to criminal investigations. Same path I had. I started out in patrol, went to vice, went to narcotics, went to criminal investigations, made sergeant, went to the road, and then went through some of the same progressions you did. The only thing that I have not done that you did was internal affairs, right. Which, I kind of felt like you did before you ever went into it. That's something I just really don't care for. Although I know it's one of those necessities. It needs to be there, and it needs to have guys in there that are fair. Mm-hmm. They're going to be looking for the truth and let the chips fall where they may, but don't color it one side or the other. And it can get hard. It can get. I can see that. Yeah,
and that's generally any assignment I do is 2 years. Again, and you were nodding your head when I was telling you how you get that. I get that 2 to 3 year itch. Yep. Yeah, internal affairs is something I never thought I would enjoy. I actually, Rich Del Toro is a very well-respected, even as an officer, and moving to sergeant and then to lieutenant. He's one of those guys that you just know he's going places. So when he reached out to say, hey, what do you think, with his lieutenant also on board with it, because at that time he was a sergeant about to be promoted, they offered it, and it was odd at first because you see the movies. All you got to do is just, open up a movie or, Google internal affairs movie, and you get all these crazy yes. movies. And there's only, I'd say, a 10% actual parallel of reality that it follows. But, I see it like this is I would hope that officers or anyone going through that process, even a civilian employee, because they still have to follow our rules and regulations and guidelines, as long as people are treated with respect and treated the way you would want to be treated, meaning with respect and treated fairly, I think that goes a long ways. the worst person you could have in internal affairs to me is someone who has an axe to grind, someone who has an agenda, or someone who can't be fair and be a fact finder, because that's all you are. You're a fact finder, not an opinion finder, a fact finder, and you base findings of alleged violations on fact. And if the facts aren't there, then the facts aren't there. And the benefit will go to the officer or the employee. So I think there's a certain amount of respect that if people feel they're being treated fairly by the person doing the investigation, I think that goes a long way. Even someone who's done something wrong, as long as they've been treated fairly and they feel they've been treated fairly, I don't think a lot of people have a problem with that. Even if they're wrong and they know they're wrong, then eventually they'll come back. I've had people come back and say, hey, I know I did wrong and this, that, and the other, and this is the way you found it, but I appreciate you treating me with respect to the process.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And you're right about the movies, too. Every time you see someone in the police department that represents internal affairs, they're the heavy. Mm-hmm.
Richard Gere.
The Richard Gere, or the I'm here to pack sand with you, partner, these kind of things. Mm-hmm. Although all the experiences I've ever seen with internal affairs, fortunately, I didn't have a lot of experience with internal affairs. It seemed to go very well. Everybody, they may not have been happy with the outcome, but they knew the outcome was there. It was fair. It was going to happen. So, but moving to something else, and before we do that, you're listening to Deploying High. I'm Chief Gene Saunders, founder and CEO of Project Lifesaver International. If you haven't subscribed yet to Deploying High, please do so and get your friends and neighbors to subscribe as well. We have some interesting guests, such as the one I have today, Sergeant Charlie Lumpkin from the Port St. Lucie Police Department. Charlie, moving to another area now. Let's talk about Project Lifesaver a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
can't wait to talk about that. It's exciting. It is. It really is exciting. I'm not being facetious.
No, I know you better than that. Yeah. So, okay, how did you get into Project Lifesaver?
So, good question, I think, and I'm dating myself a little bit because I always get this wrong. Probably, I'm saying 5 or 6 years now. I was working up in criminal investigations as a persons detective, sergeant, and we had a subject go missing, unfortunately, off of Green River Parkway out east of town, and then he ended up wandering into the Savannas, which actually, that part of the Savannas, I believe, is Martin County. So, but he lived in Port St. Lucie. So this subject suffering from the early stages of dementia or Alzheimer's, and he ended up wandering into the woods there. They found his bike, but it took a couple of days to find him. And unfortunately, he had passed away in the meantime. And at that time, the chief had come to me and say, hey, I think we have a program for people that are lost, a bracelet program. And those weren't his exact words, but he tasked me with, what is it we can do in the future to deal with this and have something? So I started digging around. I found a box underneath a detective's desk, and I asked when I first got there, what is this? And they told me what it was, and it happened to be equipment. I didn't know that at the time, your equipment that was placed under that desk, and it just wasn't being utilized. So as I reached out to a couple of companies looking for devices, that's when I think I left a message at your company looking for information, and you returned the call to me saying, not only do we do it, and we're 3 blocks away from you, but you have equipment. That equipment that I described, that's the equipment we gave your people. So it was kind of an interesting introduction, but that was the beginning of our relationship in the sense of us getting to know each other. You were more than gracious with us. You invited me to come out. I think that was right about the time you were about to have a conference. Yeah. You invited me. You did nothing but take care of me in the agency itself. And that was 4 years ago, and it's been great ever since.
Well, Port St. Lucie's is the home for headquarters, Port St. Lucie City and St. Lucie County. And you kind of want to, work closely with the people that are closest around you. This is my home. So, I feel very comfortable with doing those kind of things and getting to know you and the other people on the PD. So now that you've been into Project Lifesaver for a while, you've had a couple of searches under your belt. What do you think?
I think it's awesome. I know when I first looked at the database, and I quickly learned that we do have this program already set up, even though it's not active. It was more inactive. So we resurrected the program. We got a few people trained. I think we got another receiver or two. I know we already had one or two, and we added another one to it. We went from having 2 or 3 candidates to last night when I looked, I think we're up to 73 candidates on the program. And we could put another 700 out there, meaning the need is there. It's just the matter of people reaching out to us and us providing that service to them. But I can tell you, getting out, meeting the people, because we change those batteries every 60 days. We don't leave it up to a caregiver to change the batteries. Like I know some other programs do that, but I know our chief of police mandated that every 60 days, that caregiver and that person on the program will have a face-to-face interaction with a representative from our agency, and that's exactly what we do. And I think that builds a better relationship between the police department and the caregivers and this person, so they're familiar with us. And I think it's just one of those connections of community policing that, you just don't hand them a pack of batteries and say, hey, change this every 60 days with the hopes that they do. And then all those questions come up when that person goes missing. And then the automatic question is the battery still working? Is the device still working like it is? And yes, we have had a couple of rescues already. One as of last night, where this person was a Project Lifesaver client with Port St. Lucie, but they had family in Palm City, and the person ended up going missing from Palm City in Martin County. And eventually we made our way out there to help. And eventually he was located with the Port St. Lucie Project Lifesaver International device on.
Wow, that's wonderful. I've been doing this now for going on 23 years, and I think I still get, this feeling of satisfaction, or whatever you want to call that feeling, when I see an after-action report where somebody else has been located safely and brought home. Now, it's not quite the exuberation that I had when I was on the street. Mm-hmm. And actually, as you and I were talking a few minutes ago, you're in the search, and all of a sudden you hear that first chirp.
There's nothing like it.
Nothing like it.
Nothing like it. And I can sit here, and you and I can both sit here and try to explain, well, this is what it feels like, until you experience looking for a human being that's out there that's lost. And as you're doing what you're trained to do, and all of a sudden you hear that chirp. As soon as you hear that first chirp, first thing you go is, did I just hear a chirp? Then you want to hear another chirp, because you want to confirm that what I just heard is what I really heard. And it just, generally, if you get that chirp, now you're there. And that's probably 3/4 of the battle, is getting that chirp. And once you get that chirp, now you can utilize those resources. But there is nothing. There's a lot of things I can compare it to, but definitely an experience that you want to do again and again and again, because you're bringing someone's relative home back from where they were lost. And I don't know, it's just that satisfaction that we know it works and we know we can help. And when we can help, there's the best feeling. That's why we're in law enforcement, to help. And there's nothing better than helping someone and bringing their loved one back home.
And I agree with you. Of course I do. I've been doing this now for 23 years, right. But, and I tell people, and I get the question, and I'm sure you get it too. You're in law enforcement. You were a SWAT commander. You did all these things, and they were successful and all. Yeah, I had feelings of gratification. Yes. But when you locate somebody and you see them safely home, I think the reaction of the family tells you all you need to know about why you do this.
Yeah, it's a very emotional thing. I can tell you, we did one about, I think it was probably 6 weeks now, where the male caregiver, it was his wife that has Alzheimer's, and she went missing and wandered for probably 3 or 4 hours before he realized, and we found her relatively quick once we were notified, and the training kicked in, and we did exactly what the training is supposed to allow us to do. So grateful when I went back to make contact with him after she was found. Extremely grateful, to the point where the guy's almost in tears. And I'm a softie. Even 25 years, when you see that raw emotion with someone who is truly has so much gratitude and thankfulness, it'll make you emotional. And it's one of those things, you can't buy it. Money can't buy it. When you know someone's they're so thankful that they get emotional about it. It makes you emotional.
It does. It does. I don't care how many you've been on. Somebody asked me, how many have you been on? Well, probably documented and undocumented about 200, but the feeling never changes. It never changes. Yeah. So you've got an interesting part-time employment. So I want to give you a chance to plug that a little bit.
So, I wasn't going to bring it up, and now you brought it up.
No, hey, listen, that's the advantage of being the host. I can trap you right into something.
That's it.
So tell us about it.
So I have a separate business outside of law enforcement. It's a kayaking business. It's a guided tour in Fort Pierce, out of the state park right there, Fort Pierce Inlet State Park. And we do these guided tours in clear kayaks, meaning if the conditions are proper, meaning good, the water clarity is there. It's an amazing, even if it's not there, there's still a feeling about getting inside of something that's clear and seeing that water actually around you. And then if it's clear, that's a plus. If we see manatees, dolphins, and those are all things that we do see out there, it's amazing. It's a 2-hour tour. I've had that company now for about 2 years, and it is just a complete opposite of what my day job is. Completely different.
Well, why don't we do this? I mean, you got this business going, and hopefully this podcast is reaching a lot of people that may visit Florida. Right. How do they get in touch with you?
So the best thing to do is just if you go online and you Google Get Up and Go Kayaking, just the way I said it, getupandgokayaking.com. That'll take you to the main website, and you can find the locations bar. Just click that location bar, scroll down to either Fort Pierce or Vero Beach, because I own both of those, and it will show you all of our availability, kind of give you an overview of what the site looks like, and just some commonly requested or questions with answers to them, and everything can be done right online. And all you got to do is just Google us, go on TripAdvisor, one of those, and you'll see we are number one. We've got over 100, and I think we're up to 160, 180 something reviews, and we've only been in business for just over 2 years. So I'm really happy with that. It takes up a lot of my time. I finally incorporated my wife into the business side, which I should have done that a year and 11 months ago. But it's been very interesting. Again, something totally different than my day job. Totally different. But it's a nice kind of way to get away from all the craziness sometimes. And based just looking at from when I started in law enforcement and to now, the culture has changed. Correct.
I mean, it's just law enforcement has changed. It keeps evolving, changing, and I think that's just a reflection of society and what law enforcement has to do to adjust to it, but still do the job that is demanded. And let's face it, law enforcement is one of those jobs that whenever something comes up and it doesn't fit anywhere else, where does it end up?
Yeah.
It ends up in law enforcement.
Right. From the guy running down the street with a knife wanting to kill people to the injured squirrel in their front yard. And they don't know who to call.
Absolutely.
The snake stuck behind their washing machine.
Yep.
Who do they call? They don't call their neighbor. They call the police.
They don't call Ghostbusters.
Exactly. There you go. So we even get those too. You never know.
Yeah, we got some of those too, about the aliens invading.
Yes.
So you're listening to Deploying High with Chief Gene Saunders, founder and CEO of Project Lifesaver International. I have been talking to Sergeant Charlie Lumpkin from the Port St. Lucie Police Department, and I'd like to close, Charlie, with one last question.
Sure.
If some young guy or girl comes up to you and says, Sergeant Lumpkin, I'm thinking about going into law enforcement. Should I or shouldn't I, and what are the benefits or not? Is that something you'd like to tackle?
Oh, wow. I didn't expect that question. That's a good one. So what I do is I kind of reflect back on when I was young, even though it's a different, we're clearly in a different, back then they didn't have social media when I joined the police
absolutely.
department. They didn't have body cams. They didn't have all this stuff. So I would probably ask that person, you're expressing an interest in law enforcement. I'd probably dig a little bit deeper and say, what exactly about law enforcement are you interested in? What are you looking at doing? And based on their answer, let's say it's a positive answer. I want to help people. I want to do this. I know some people that shoo people away from the law enforcement profession, but you can't have everybody get shooed away just because times are tough. Yes, things are changing. I think a lot of the changes that are being made right now aren't necessarily all bad. I think some of those are good. We're in a different day and age right now, but I would ensure that person, this is really what you want to do, meaning it's fun and it's exciting, but it's also very dangerous. And realize that it's not all about catching bad guys and taking bad guys and girls to jail. There's also an element there that you want to have that ability to help people and realize not just that kind of I think everyone said, I get into it to help people. No, I mean really getting into it to help people, whatever way you can help them, whether it's an immediate response of an emergency or you come across a family that's in need and you decide to take an extra step to help them with what's going on in their life. So, and I would say if that decision is made by them that, yes, I think they're really in it for the right reasons, then tell them to do the best they can and get themselves, everything's education driven. So a lot of agencies won't even look at you unless you have a degree. So if that's the agency they're interested, whether it be federal, county, or state or local, find out what exactly do you want to do in law enforcement? What agency are you interested in? Find out what their prerequisites are for you to get in the door, get those, and then just do the best you can, and always remember the golden rule: treat people the way you'd like to be treated. And I think it usually works out.
I don't think it could have been summed up any better, Charlie.
Thanks.
Listen, I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We will have you back sometime in the future. You've been listening to Deploying High with Chief Gene Saunders, founder and CEO of Project Lifesaver International. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so and get your friends and neighbors and anybody you know that happen to talk to on the street to subscribe to Deploying High. Charlie, thank you again, and I hope to see y'all and talk with all of y'all at some time in the future. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Deploying High podcast with Chief Gene Saunders, brought to you by Project Lifesaver International. Deploying High would like to thank all of our supporters across the country and around the world. If you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe to our channel, make a donation, and don't forget to tell a friend about us. All proceeds from the Deploying High podcast go to support Project Lifesaver International, online at projectlifesaver.org, the original 501c3 nonprofit organization.